Every once in a while, a story comes along that reminds us of the quiet strength of the human spirit. A story that shines a light on injustice and inspires us to be better. Today, we bring you the compelling journey of Adrienne Taylor, a nurse whose resilience in the face of workplace discrimination transformed not only her own life, but the culture of an entire hospital. This is a story of racism confronted, courage displayed, and redemption achieved. Adrienne's tale is more than just an account of challenges. It's a reminder of the power of empathy, the importance of all eyes, and the potential for change when we refuse to remain silent. Through her experiences, we'll uncover the often hidden realities of subtle racism, the impact of unwavering professionalism, and how one unexpected ally can turn the tide of injustice. If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories of inspiration and transformation. And let us know in the comments below, what's your personal mantra when facing challenges? Share something like, "I am a force of courage and change in the world," to inspire others on their own journeys. Let's dive in. Our story begins with Adrienne Taylor on her first day at Horizon Health Hospital. A day filled with hope and the promise of making a difference. But behind the polished exterior of the institution lay a culture in desperate need of change. Adrienne Taylor, a seasoned nurse with years of experience and an unwavering passion for caregiving, entered Horizon Health Hospital with a spring in her step and a heart full of hope. She had always believed that nursing was not just a job, a calling, a way to heal, connect, and serve. Having heard of the hospital's state-of-the-art facilities and its mission to provide exceptional care, Adrienne felt confident that her skills and dedication would find a perfect home. However, from the moment she walked through the hospital's pristine hallways, something felt off. There were the usual pleasantries from the administrative staff, but they lacked warmth. As she was introduced to her colleagues, she noticed subtle shifts in their expressions, strained smiles, brief eye contact, and an atmosphere that hinted at discomfort. Adrienne brushed it off as first-day jitters, but as the day unfolded, those small signals began to paint a larger picture. During her orientation meeting, she noticed that while others were actively engaged in discussions, her attempts to contribute were met with polite but dismissive responses. Team members exchanged knowing glances that she couldn't quite interpret. By the end of the day, Adrienne realized she had been excluded from several informal huddles where critical patient care plans were being discussed. As the days turned into weeks, Adrienne's initial optimism began to wane. She was a highly skilled nurse, yet her assignments often involved the most challenging cases, patients who were notoriously difficult, or tasks that felt more like tests than genuine responsibilities. At first, she took it as a chance to prove herself, but soon, it became clear this was no mere trial period. Adrienne was being sidelined, her contributions undervalued, and her presence, it seemed, unwelcome. The hospital's culture of excellence, Adrienne discovered, was marred by a darker undercurrent, a culture where subtle racism flourished under the guise of professionalism. It wasn't the overt hostility of slurs or blatant discrimination. Instead, it was the cold stares in the break room, the whispered conversations that stopped when she walked in, and the sense of isolation that weighed heavier with each passing day. One morning, Adrienne arrived to find her patient assignments altered without her input. Several of her colleagues had evidently swapped shifts to avoid working alongside her. It was not uncommon for her ideas to be ignored during meetings, only to resurface later, credited to someone else. These actions were like paper cuts, small, but cumulatively painful. Despite it all, Adrienne maintained her professionalism. Her love for her patients kept her grounded. She poured her energy into their care, often going above and beyond to ensure their comfort. For Adrienne, nursing was about humanity, and she refused to let the toxic environment dampen her spirit. Her first true challenge came when she was paired with a young intern to oversee a patient experiencing a critical cardiac event. While Adrienne calmly coordinated the team's efforts to stabilize the patient, the intern froze under pressure. When the patient was finally stabilized, the attending physician credited the intern for the success. dismissing Adrienne's pivotal role entirely. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but Adrienne chose grace over confrontation. The turning point came during a staff meeting where a new initiative on diversity and inclusion was being discussed. Adrienne, cautiously hopeful, shared her experiences, framing them not as grievances but as opportunities for growth within the organization. Her words were met with silence. The room grew tense, and the meeting quickly shifted topics. It was clear that her voice was not welcome. By now, Adrienne's resilience was being tested to its limits. Yet, she refused to let bitterness consume her. She reminded herself of why she had chosen this path: to heal, to serve, and to make a difference, even in the most challenging circumstances. Her journey, however, was far from over. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, her story was about to intersect with that of a patient who would change everything. A man who seemed ordinary at first glance, but carried an extraordinary purpose. This encounter would not only transform Adrienne's trajectory, but also shine a light on the hospital's deeply entrenched biases, sparking a wave of change that no one could have anticipated. As we transition to the next chapter, we'll delve deeper into the challenges Adrienne faced within the hospital's hostile atmosphere, and how these obstacles shaped her into an unyielding advocate for justice. Stay with us as we uncover the invisible battles and quiet strength that define Adrienne's journey. Coming up next, Adrienne confronts the unspoken challenges of a workplace rife with subtle racism. From deliberate oversight to quiet exclusion, we'll explore how her unwavering commitment to her patients becomes both her anchor and her beacon of hope. Don't miss this emotional dive into the struggles and triumphs of a nurse determined to make a difference. Adrienne Taylor quickly realized that working at Horizon Health Hospital would require more than her nursing skills. From the outside, the hospital seemed like a paragon of modern medicine, but within its walls, Adrienne encountered a culture steeped in invisible barriers. These barriers weren't physical or even openly acknowledged. They were quiet, pervasive, and deeply ingrained in the way people interacted. One of the first signs of trouble came during a routine team briefing. Adrienne, seated at the edge of a crowded conference table, observed how seamlessly her colleagues interacted, laughing and exchanging ideas. When Adrienne spoke up to contribute, her voice was met with polite nods, but the conversation swiftly moved on, as if she hadn't spoken at all. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, but as these moments multiplied, the pattern became undeniable. Adrienne was being systematically excluded from meaningful discussions. Critical decisions about patient care were often made in impromptu meetings she wasn't invited to, leaving her to scramble for information after the fact. Her suggestions during formal meetings were overlooked, only to resurface days later as someone else's idea. The isolation wasn't always overt. It came in the form of cold stares, casual jokes that veered into inappropriate territory, and an unspoken sense that she didn't belong. The subtleties of this exclusion were hard to define, even harder to confront. It wasn't as if anyone had openly insulted her or explicitly denied her opportunities. Rather, it was the accumulation of microaggressions, small, seemingly insignificant actions that together formed a wall she could neither climb nor tear down. Adrienne's first major test in this hostile environment came during a particularly hectic shift in the intensive care unit. A patient suffering from a severe allergic reaction was rushed in, and the medical team sprang into action. Adrienne, as the lead nurse on duty, took charge, organizing the team with precision. Yet, when the crisis passed and the patient stabilized, the attending physician publicly praised another nurse, a junior colleague who had merely followed Adrienne's instructions. Moments like these were painful, not because Adrienne craved recognition, but because they underscored how easily her contributions could be erased. It wasn't just about her professional pride, it was about the message this sent to the entire team, reinforcing the idea that Adrienne's presence was somehow less valuable. The challenges weren't limited to her colleagues. Adrienne soon found herself navigating the prejudices of certain patients as well. On one occasion, she was assigned to a patient who refused her care, citing a preference for someone else. While Adrienne maintained her professionalism, the sting of rejection was hard to ignore. In another instance, a patient openly questioned her qualifications. Despite her years of experience and a spotless track record, despite these affronts, Adrienne remained steadfast. She believed in the power of compassion, even in the face of hostility. For her, nursing was about the patient, not the politics. She approached every interaction with empathy, even when it wasn't reciprocated. And her patients often recognized her genuine care. Yet, the emotional toll of these encounters weighed heavily on her. The most difficult aspect of Adrienne's journey was the sense of invisibility. While her colleagues shared camaraderie and support, Adrienne felt like an outsider. During lunch breaks, she often found herself eating alone. Her presence at the communal table met with awkward silences. When she asked for feedback on her work, it was given sparingly and without the constructive depth afforded to others. Even her supervisor, a normally attentive leader, seemed distant, as if unsure of how to engage with her. Adrienne began to wonder if she was imagining things. She questioned whether she was being too sensitive, too quick to interpret slights where none existed. But when she confided in a trusted friend outside of work, they validated her feelings, reminding her that subtle racism often thrives in ambiguity. It was this validation that gave Adrienne the strength to persist. She resolved to let her work speak for itself, to prove her worth through her actions rather than her words. Her resolve was tested again when a major hospital event, the annual awards ceremony, rolled around. Adrienne had been instrumental in saving a patient's life during a particularly challenging case, working tirelessly to coordinate care across multiple departments. Yet, when the time came to recognize outstanding contributions, her name wasn't mentioned. The award went instead to a colleague who had played a much smaller role in the same case. It was a crushing blow, but Adrienne refused to let bitterness consume her. She reminded herself of her core values: compassion, resilience, and the belief that true change comes not from anger, but from steadfast integrity. She continued to pour her energy into her work, earning the respect of her patients, even if her peers failed to see her worth. What Adrienne didn't know was that someone was paying attention. Ulysses Concetto, a patient recovering from a recent surgery, had been quietly observing her. From his hospital bed, Ulysses noticed the way Adrienne interacted with her colleagues, the professionalism she displayed even in the face of disrespect, and the genuine care she showed for every patient. To him, Adrienne's actions stood in stark contrast to the coldness he observed in others. Ulysses began to piece together a troubling picture of the hospital's culture. He saw the ways Adrienne was subtly undermined, how her contributions were minimized, and how the biases of her colleague shaped the dynamics of the workplace. What Adrienne viewed as isolated incidents, Ulysses saw as symptoms of a deeper problem, a problem that went beyond one nurse's experience to reflect a systemic issue within the institution. As Adrienne navigated the challenges of her daily routine, she had no idea that her actions were inspiring someone who would soon become her most powerful ally. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the story of Ulysses Concetto, a patient who was more than he appeared. As Ulysses steps into the spotlight, his observations and revelations will set the stage for a confrontation that will shake the hospital's foundations. Stay tuned for the unfolding drama of courage and change. As the weeks turned into months, Adrienne's battle against the subtle yet persistent undercurrents of racism at Horizon Health Hospital intensified. Among her most challenging adversaries was Dr. Richie Gill, a senior physician whose authority and influence loomed large in the hospital. To many, Dr. Gill was the epitome of success: confident, skilled, and seemingly respected by his peers. But for Adrienne, he represented a particular brand of professional prejudice, cloaked in charm and plausible deniability, yet unmistakable in its impact. Dr. Gill's disdain for Adrienne was not overt. It was shrouded in professionalism, a veneer that made it difficult to call out directly, but his actions spoke volumes. He frequently overloaded Adrienne with the most grueling and thankless tasks that others, less experienced and less capable, were conveniently spared. Complex cases involving high-stress procedures often landed on Adrienne's lap, not as an acknowledgement of her skill, but as a test of her endurance. Take, for instance, the case of Mrs. Halpert, an elderly patient with a cascade of complications. Her condition required meticulous monitoring, constant medication adjustments, and a sharp eye for sudden changes. While Adrienne meticulously managed the case, Dr. Gill's tone remained patronizing. He micromanaged her every move, scrutinizing her decisions in ways he didn't with others. Yet, when Mrs. Halpert's condition improved dramatically under Adrienne's care, there was no acknowledgement, no nod of approval. Dr. Gill redirected the credit to the medical team as a whole, carefully sidestepping Adrienne's pivotal role. It wasn't just the workload. It was the deliberate dismissal of Adrienne's expertise. During morning rounds, Dr. Gill had a habit of interrupting her reports, peppering her with unnecessary questions, and then rephrasing her observations as if they were his own. Adrienne's insights, no matter how sharp or evidence-based, were often met with skepticism. In contrast, her colleagues, some with far less experience, were treated with deference. For Adrienne, these interactions were both exhausting and disheartening. She found herself working twice as hard to prove herself, yet her efforts seemed to vanish into the ether of Dr. Gill's dismissive attitude. It wasn't just about professional recognition. It was about the constant erosion of her confidence, the quiet message that no matter how competent she was, it would never be enough. But Adrienne was not one to falter easily. She approached each challenge with the same level of care and commitment that had defined her career from the beginning. Her focus remained on her patients, who, despite the toxicity of the environment, became her greatest source of motivation. One day, a turning point emerged in the form of an unexpected crisis. A young boy named Liam was rushed into the emergency room after a severe allergic reaction. His condition was rapidly deteriorating, and the medical team was struggling to stabilize him. Dr. Gill was leading the case but seemed overwhelmed, issuing conflicting orders that only added to the chaos. Adrienne, observing the situation, knew she had to act. With calm precision, she stepped in, organizing the team and prioritizing tasks. She communicated clearly and effectively, ensuring that the necessary medications were administered promptly and that the boy's airway was protected. Within minutes, the situation stabilized and Liam's breathing returned to normal. The relief in the room was palpable, but Dr. Gill's reaction was anything but gracious. Rather than acknowledging Adrienne's decisive leadership, he downplayed her role, attributing the success to a team effort. The staff who had witnessed the event knew the truth, but in the hierarchy of the hospital, Dr. Gill's narrative prevailed. Moments like these were emblematic of the systemic challenges Adrienne faced. Her skills were undeniable, yet they were constantly overshadowed by a culture that prioritized appearances over substance, hierarchy over merit. However, not everyone was blind to Adrienne's contributions. A small but growing number of colleagues began to notice her quiet resilience. Among them was Lisa, a junior nurse who admired Adrienne's dedication and often sought her guidance. "How do you stay so composed?" Lisa asked one evening after a particularly grueling shift. Adrienne smiled softly and replied, "You focus on what matters, the patients. The rest is just noise." Adrienne's words carried weight, but even she couldn't ignore the toll the environment was taking on her. Her days were filled with microaggressions and her nights with self-doubt. Yet, through it all, she clung to her belief in the power of compassion and professionalism. Unbeknownst to Adrienne, her unyielding spirit was inspiring someone else, someone whose quiet observations would soon change the course of her story. Ulysses Conchetto, the patient she had treated with care and kindness, had been taking mental notes of every interaction he witnessed. From his hospital bed, he saw the stark contrast between Adrienne's competence and the dismissive treatment she received from colleagues like Dr. Gil. Ulysses, a man of considerable influence, recognized the injustice for what it was, but instead of reacting impulsively, he chose to observe further, piecing together the broader context of the hospital's toxic culture. What he discovered shocked him, and he resolved to act, not just for Adrienne's sake, but for the countless others who had likely endured similar treatment. In the next chapter, we'll uncover Ulysses' true identity and the surprising role he plays in Adrienne's journey. His revelations will challenge the hospital's leadership and set the stage for a confrontation that no one could have anticipated. Stay tuned to see how one patient's silent observations spark a revolution for justice and equality. Amidst the daily struggles Adrienne Taylor endured at Horizon Health Hospital, one figure stood out not as a colleague or a superior but as a patient. Ulysses Conchetto, admitted for what seemed to be a routine surgery, appeared at first glance to be just another name on the long list of those in need of care. But beneath his unassuming exterior lay a sharp mind and a heart deeply attuned to the undercurrents of human behavior. From the moment he arrived, Ulysses noticed the quiet precision with which Adrienne worked. Unlike some of the nurses he had encountered before, Adrienne exuded an aura of calm competence. Her movements were efficient yet gentle, her tone warm but professional. To Ulysses, Adrienne embodied the kind of care that reassured patients and restored their faith in the medical system. But as the days passed, Ulysses began to notice something troubling. While Adrienne's interactions with patients were marked by empathy and expertise, her interactions with her colleagues were often stilted. He saw how her ideas were overlooked in group discussions, how she was assigned the most difficult tasks without acknowledgement, and how her presence seemed to elicit subtle but palpable discomfort among certain staff members. Ulysses, a man with a keen sense of observation, started to piece together the puzzle. One day, as he rested in his hospital room, he overheard a conversation between two nurses outside his door. They spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with condescension as they referred to Adrienne's recent efforts during an emergency. "She thinks she's better than everyone," one of them muttered. The other chuckled in agreement. These moments, small but significant, painted a stark picture of the environment Adrienne faced daily. Ulysses recognized the signs of covert racism, the kind that often went unspoken, but was deeply ingrained in workplace dynamics. Having witnessed similar behavior in other professional settings, he knew that this wasn't just a series of isolated incidents. It was systemic, and Adrienne was bearing the brunt of it. One particular incident cemented Ulysses' determination to intervene. During his recovery, he noticed a shift in his medication schedule. Concerned, he called for a nurse to explain the change. Adrienne was the one who arrived, chart in hand, to address his concerns. She patiently walked him through the adjustments, ensuring he understood every detail. As Adrienne spoke, another nurse entered the room, a senior member of the team. She interrupted Adrienne mid-sentence, dismissing her explanation and taking over the conversation. The senior nurse's tone was condescending, and her explanations were riddled with inaccuracies. Adrienne, to her credit, remained composed, quietly correcting the errors without challenging the authority of her colleague. After the senior nurse left, Ulysses turned to Adrienne. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. Adrienne offered a tired smile. "It's not worth the argument," she said softly. "What matters is that you're taken care of." To Ulysses, this was the moment that solidified Adrienne's strength and integrity. She wasn't just enduring the hostility, she was rising above it, prioritizing her patients despite the systemic challenges she faced. But Ulysses wasn't content to remain a passive observer. What Adrienne didn't know was that Ulysses Conchetto was no ordinary patient. He was the CEO of a prominent healthcare company, known for his commitment to equity and excellence in medical practice. His presence at Horizon Health Hospital was not coincidental. Ulysses had chosen the hospital as part of a personal initiative to understand the realities faced by frontline healthcare workers. The systemic biases and toxic culture he witnessed at Horizon Health were not only unacceptable, but emblematic of a broader issue in the industry. And Adrienne's struggles were the tipping point that spurred him into action. Ulysses began documenting his observations, noting specific incidents that highlighted the hospital's failings. He paid close attention to the interactions between staff, the allocation of responsibilities, and the patterns of exclusion Adrienne faced. His background in organizational leadership allowed him to see the structural flaws that perpetuated the toxic environment. What struck Ulysses most profoundly was Adrienne's unwavering professionalism. Despite being sidelined, dismissed, and undervalued, She never compromised on the quality of care she provided. To him, Adrienne was not just a victim of workplace discrimination. She was a testament to the resilience and integrity that could drive meaningful change. Ulysses knew he couldn't remain silent. He began formulating a plan to address the issues he had observed, leveraging his position and influence to bring about reform. But he also knew that the changes he envisioned couldn't come from him alone. They needed to be rooted in the experiences of those most affected people like Adrienne, whose courage in the face of adversity could inspire others to stand up for what was right. As Ulysses prepared to reveal his findings, he decided to first approach Adrienne. He wanted her to know that her efforts had not gone unnoticed and that she was not alone in her fight. During one of her routine check-ins, he asked if she could spare a moment to talk. "I've been watching you," he began, his tone serious but kind. "You're remarkable at what you do, but I can see that you're carrying more than your fair share of burdens here." Adrienne, caught off guard, hesitated. "I'm just doing my job," she replied cautiously. "No," Ulysses said firmly. "You're doing more than that, and it's time someone acknowledged it." He proceeded to share his observations, expressing his admiration for her professionalism and his concerns about the culture of the hospital. Adrienne listened, her emotions a mix of gratitude and skepticism. She had grown accustomed to fighting her battles alone and wasn't sure what to make of Ulysses' words. Then, Ulysses revealed his identity. "I'm not just a patient here," he said. "I have the resources and the platform to address what's happening in this hospital. But I need your voice. Your story has the power to drive the change that's so desperately needed." Adrienne was stunned. For the first time since joining Horizon Health, she felt seen not just as a nurse, but as a person whose experiences mattered. In the next chapter, we'll see how Ulysses and Adrienne join forces to confront the hospital's leadership. Their alliance will challenge the entrenched biases within the institution and set the stage for a reckoning that will change the culture of Horizon Health forever. Don't miss this powerful chapter of accountability and transformation. In the world of healthcare, patients come from all walks of life, bringing with them not only their ailments, but also their beliefs, biases, and prejudices. For Adrienne Taylor, this reality often added another layer of complexity to her work at Horizon Health Hospital. While navigating the subtle racism of her colleagues was challenging enough, her encounters with openly racist patients pushed her resolve and professionalism to their limits. Adrienne's first notable experience with a racist patient occurred during a quiet night shift. Mr. Calloway, an elderly man admitted for a routine procedure, had been assigned to her care. As Adrienne entered his room to check his vitals, his demeanor shifted visibly. His polite facade gave way to a cold, scrutinizing glare. "You're my nurse?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes, Mr. Calloway," Adrienne replied evenly, maintaining her professionalism. "I'll be taking care of you tonight. If there's anything you need, please let me know." Instead of a thank you, Mr. Calloway muttered under his breath, his words sharp and unmistakable. "I'd prefer someone else." The comment was like a slap, but Adrienne had grown accustomed to such moments. Suppressing her initial reaction, she calmly explained that she was the nurse assigned to his care and assured him that she would provide the highest standard of treatment. Despite his visible discomfort, Adrienne completed her tasks with grace, never allowing his prejudice to disrupt her focus. But the incident weighed on her. After leaving Mr. Calloway's room, Adrienne took a moment to steady herself. She reminded herself that his biases were a reflection of his own limitations, not hers. This mental resilience became her anchor in moments like these, enabling her to rise above the hostility and continue serving her patients with unwavering compassion. Unfortunately, encounters like this were not isolated. On another occasion, Adrienne was assigned to care for Mrs. Davenport, a middle-aged woman recovering from surgery. Unlike Mr. Calloway, Mrs. Davenport's racism wasn't blunt, but veiled in patronizing remarks. She questioned Adrienne's credentials, her tone dripping with condescension. "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Mrs. Davenport asked as Adrienne prepared to administer her medication. "Yes, Mrs. Davenport," Adrienne replied with patience. I've reviewed your chart thoroughly, and I'll ensure that your medication is administered correctly." Mrs. Davenport sighed audibly, her skepticism evident. "I just hope there's no mistake," she murmured, loud enough for Adrienne to hear. Despite these provocations, Adrienne's professionalism never faltered. She understood that responding with anger or defensiveness would only confirm the biases these patients held. Instead, she let her actions speak for themselves, delivering exceptional care that left no room for doubt about her competence. What made these encounters particularly challenging was the emotional toll they took. Adrienne often found herself reflecting on the broader implications of such incidents. She questioned why, in an environment dedicated to healing and compassion, prejudice was still so pervasive. These moments forced her to confront the painful reality that racism wasn't confined to her workplace. It permeated every facet of society, including the very patients she sought to help. Yet Adrienne refused to let these experiences define her. Instead, she viewed them as opportunities to demonstrate the power of empathy and professionalism. By treating even her most difficult patients with respect and kindness, Adrienne hoped to challenge their preconceived notions and leave them with a different perspective. One particularly profound moment came when Adrienne cared for a patient named Mr. Lambert. Initially, Mr. Lambert was openly hostile, refusing to make eye contact and responding to Adrienne's questions with curt, dismissive answers. Over the course of his stay, however, something began to shift. Adrienne's consistent care, her attention to detail, and her genuine concern for his well-being gradually softened his demeanor. On the day of his discharge, Mr. Lambert surprised Adrienne with a heartfelt acknowledgement. "You've been good to me," he said, his voice tinged with regret. "I didn't make it easy for you, but you didn't let that stop you." Adrienne smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet sense of accomplishment. "It's my job to care for everyone," she replied simply. For Adrienne, moments like these reaffirmed her belief in the transformative power of compassion. While she couldn't change everyone's perspective, she could plant seeds of understanding, one patient at a time. But the challenges weren't always so easily resolved. Some patients remained steadfast in their prejudice, refusing to acknowledge Adrienne's humanity no matter how well she cared for them. These encounters were a stark reminder of the systemic nature of racism, a problem too deeply entrenched to be solved through individual acts of kindness alone. Adrienne's experiences with racist patients also revealed the limitations of her workplace. Despite the hospital's stated commitment to diversity and inclusion, there were no formal protocols for addressing patient discrimination against staff. This left Adrienne and her colleagues to navigate these situations largely on their own, often without the support they needed. One night, after a particularly difficult encounter with a patient who had hurled a racial slur at her, Adrienne confided in a trusted colleague. "How do you deal with this?" she asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Her colleague, an older nurse who had faced similar challenges throughout her career, offered a bittersweet smile. "You learn to pick your battles," she said, "but that doesn't mean it gets easier. Just remember, you're not alone in this." Those words stayed with Adrienne. They reminded her that, while her struggles were uniquely hers, she was part of a larger community of professionals facing similar challenges. This sense of solidarity, though unspoken, became a source of strength for Adrienne as she continued to navigate the complexities of her role. And amidst these struggles, one patient continued to watch her closely. Ulysses Concetto, still recovering from his surgery, saw how Adrienne handled even the most hostile patients with grace and composure. To him, her actions were nothing short of heroic. They reinforced his conviction that Adrienne's story needed to be heard, and that the culture of Horizon Health Hospital needed to change. In the next chapter, we'll witness Ulysses' shocking revelation about his true purpose at Horizon Health Hospital. His decision to act will set the stage for a dramatic confrontation with the hospital's leadership, paving the way for long overdue change. Stay tuned to see how one patient's courage and one nurse's resilience spark a revolution for justice and equality. Adrienne Taylor had no idea that the man lying in room 302, quietly observing her every move, was more than just another patient. Ulysses Concetto had kept his true identity a secret, blending into the fabric of the hospital as just another name on the patient roster. But beneath his unassuming demeanor lay a powerful force of change, one that Adrian's quiet courage had unknowingly awakened. Ulysses had arrived at Horizon Health Hospital under the guise of seeking routine care, but his true purpose ran much deeper. As the CEO of Vitnova Healthcare Systems, a leading organization in the medical industry, Ulysses had dedicated his career to transforming healthcare into a more inclusive and equitable space. He was known for his undercover visits to healthcare facilities, an unconventional yet effective strategy to uncover the realities of frontline care. During his stay at Horizon Health, Ulysses witnessed firsthand the subtle yet pervasive culture of racism that Adrienne endured. Every dismissal of her ideas, every covert act of exclusion, and every moment of silent hostility painted a picture of an institution failing to live up to its values. But what struck Ulysses most profoundly was Adrienne's unyielding professionalism in the face of it all. As Ulysses recovered, he began formulating a plan to address the systemic issues he had observed. But before he acted, he knew he needed Adrienne's voice to amplify the change he envisioned. One afternoon, during Adrienne's routine rounds, Ulysses asked if she could spare a moment to talk. "What is it, Mr. Concetto?" Adrienne asked with her usual warmth, though she was visibly tired from a long shift. "I need to share something with you," he began, his tone uncharacteristically serious. "You've shown extraordinary strength and integrity in this hospital, and it hasn't gone unnoticed." Adrienne hesitated, unsure of where this was going. "I'm just doing my job," she replied cautiously. Ulysses shook his head. "No, you're doing much more than that, and I think it's time you understood the bigger picture." Taking a deep breath, Ulysses revealed his true identity. "I'm not just a patient," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "I'm the CEO of Vitnova Healthcare Systems, and I came to this hospital to observe its culture and practices. What I've seen here, what I've seen you endure, has opened my eyes to problems that run far deeper than I expected." Adrienne's expression shifted from disbelief to cautious curiosity. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "Because you're at the heart of this story," Ulysses replied. "Your courage, your resilience, it's inspired me to act. But I can't do it alone. I need your perspective, your experiences, to drive the change this hospital so desperately needs." For a moment, Adrienne was at a loss for words. She had spent months feeling invisible, her contributions overshadowed by systemic bias and the indifference of her peers. Now, someone was not only acknowledging her struggles, but asking for her voice in a way that felt profoundly validating. Ulysses continued, his conviction evident. "I've documented everything I've observed here, the dismissive attitudes, the exclusionary behaviors, the blatant disregard for your contributions. But this isn't just about pointing fingers. It's about creating a system where no one else has to endure what you've gone through. Together, we can confront the leadership and demand accountability." Adrienne listened intently, her mind racing. The idea of confronting the hospital's leadership was daunting, but the thought of driving meaningful change was equally compelling. "What exactly do you have in mind?" she asked, her tone measured but curious. "I want to meet with the hospital's board and leadership team," Ulysses explained. "I plan to present my findings and propose reforms that address the toxic culture here. But your voice, the voice of someone who has lived this experience, is essential. You can put a human face to the issue in a way that no report or statistic ever could." Adrienne hesitated. She had spent her career avoiding the spotlight, focusing on her patients rather than the politics of the workplace. But as she looked at Ulysses, she saw not just an ally, but an opportunity to turn her struggles into a catalyst for change. "What if they don't listen?" she asked quietly. "They will," Ulysses said firmly, "because I won't give them a choice. And if they don't, I'll take this to the media, to the community, to anyone who will listen. This hospital's reputation is at stake, and they know it." Adrienne felt a surge of both fear and determination. For months, she had shouldered the burden of her experiences alone, questioning whether her efforts were making any difference. Now, someone was offering her a chance to not only be heard, but to create a better future for others like her. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady. Ulysses smiled, a mixture of relief and admiration in his expression. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "You're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for everyone who's ever been made to feel less than they are." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Ulysses worked tirelessly to compile his observations into a comprehensive report, detailing the systemic issues he had uncovered at Horizon Health. Meanwhile, Adrienne reflected on her experiences, preparing to share her story with a level of honesty and vulnerability that felt both empowering and intimidating. When the day of the meeting arrived, Adrienne and Ulysses walked into the boardroom side by side. The room was filled with the hospital's leadership team, including Dr. Greaves, the director of operations, and several department heads. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to defensiveness as Ulysses introduced himself and outlined the purpose of the meeting. What followed was a powerful and unflinching presentation. Ulysses began by highlighting the broader implications of workplace discrimination, citing industry data and case studies to underscore the need for systemic change. Then, he turned the floor over to Adrienne. With a deep breath, Adrienne began to speak. She recounted her experiences at the hospital, from the microaggressions of her colleagues to the overt hostility of certain patients. She spoke of the isolation, the erasure of her contributions, and the emotional toll of navigating a culture that seemed intent on undermining her. Her voice was steady, but her words carried the weight of months of suppressed frustration and resilience. By the time she finished, the room was silent, the gravity of her story hanging heavy in the air. Ulysses seized the moment, outlining a series of actionable reforms: mandatory diversity and inclusion training, the establishment of a staff support network, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. He made it clear that these changes were not optional. "This is not just about compliance," he said. "It's about the integrity of your institution and the care you provide to your patients. If you want to be a leader in this industry, you must lead by example." In the next chapter, we'll see how the hospital leadership reacts to Ulysses and Adrienne's revelations. Will they embrace the call for change, or will resistance threaten to derail their efforts? Stay tuned as we dive into the intense confrontation and the beginning of a transformative journey for Horizon Health. The tension in the room was palpable. Adrienne Taylor had just finished sharing her story. Every struggle, every slight, every moment of resilience in the face of systemic racism at Horizon Health Hospital. Across the table sat the hospital's leadership team, a mix of stoic faces, furrowed brows, and the occasional uneasy glance. At the head of the table was Dr. Greaves, the director of operations, whose reputation as a no-nonsense administrator preceded him. Ulysses Concetto broke the silence. "What you've just heard isn't an isolated case," he began, his voice calm but firm. "This is a systemic issue that has festered under your leadership, and unless you take action, the consequences both for this institution and the people it serves will be severe." Dr. Greaves adjusted his glasses, leaning forward with an air of skepticism. "Mr. Concetto, while I appreciate your perspective, Horizon Health prides itself on being an inclusive workplace. Adrienne's experience, while regrettable, does not necessarily reflect the culture of this institution as a whole." Ulysses' gaze hardened. "Dr. Greaves, with all due respect, that response is precisely the problem. Dismissing these issues as isolated incidents ignores the lived realities of your staff and perpetuates the very culture you claim to stand against." Adrienne, emboldened by Ulysses' support, spoke up. "With respect, Dr. Greaves, this isn't about pride or perception. It's about the day-to-day reality of working here. I've been excluded, dismissed, and undermined, not because of my abilities but because of biases that go unchecked. If this hospital truly values inclusion, then it's time to prove it." Dr. Greaves shifted uncomfortably, his defensive posture softening slightly under the weight of Adrienne's words. Around the table, other leaders began to murmur among themselves, their expressions betraying a mix of guilt and concern. Sensing an opening, Ulysses continued. "I've compiled a detailed report outlining the systemic issues at play here, supported by first-hand observations and industry data. This report doesn't just highlight the problems, it offers solutions. But implementing these changes will require leadership that's willing to listen, to acknowledge its shortcomings, and to act decisively. He slid a thick folder across the table, its contents meticulously organized. Inside were pages of observations, examples of best practices from other institutions, and a roadmap for reform. The leadership team leafed through the documents, their expressions growing more serious with each page. The proposed changes were comprehensive: mandatory diversity and inclusion training, a program designed to address unconscious bias, promote cultural competence, and foster a more inclusive workplace, a staff support network, a safe space for employees to voice concerns, seek guidance, and access resources without fear of retaliation, a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, clear protocols for addressing complaints, with transparent consequences for violators, leadership accountability measures, regular audits of workplace culture, with leadership evaluations tied to progress on diversity and inclusion metrics. These reforms aren't just about compliance, Ulysses explained. They're about creating an environment where every employee, regardless of race, gender, or background, can thrive. This isn't just the right thing to do. It's essential for the success of your institution. One of the board members, a woman named Karen who oversaw human resources, raised a hand. "I agree that change is needed," she said cautiously. "But implementing these reforms will take time and resources. How do we balance these priorities with the day-to-day demands of running the hospital?" Adrienne spoke up again, her voice steady but impassioned. "Karen, every day that passes without action is another day someone like me feels invisible, undervalued, and unsupported. The cost of inaction is far greater than the investment required to make these changes." Ulysses nodded in agreement. "Karen, let me put it this way. The true cost is measured not just in employee turnover or patient satisfaction scores, but in the trust and integrity of this institution. You can't afford not to act." For the next hour, the room buzzed with discussion. There were objections, questions, and moments of hesitation, but the momentum was undeniable. The combination of Adrienne's personal testimony and Ulysses' authoritative presence had shifted the conversation from denial to possibility. By the end of the meeting, Dr. Greaves leaned back in his chair, visibly drained but contemplative. "I can't promise immediate results," he said finally, his tone more measured than before. "But I can promise that we will take this seriously. Let's start with the training and the support network, and we'll revisit the other reforms as we progress." It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was a start. Adrienne and Ulysses left the boardroom knowing that the seeds of change had been planted. As they walked down the corridor, Adrienne turned to Ulysses. "Do you think they'll follow through?" she asked, her voice tinged with cautious hope. "They have no choice," Ulysses replied with a small smile. "You've made sure of that." For Adrienne, the experience was transformative. She had spent months feeling voiceless, her efforts overshadowed by systemic bias. But now she realized the power of her voice, not just to advocate for herself, but to inspire change for others. And the journey was far from over. As the first steps toward reform began to take shape, Adrienne found herself stepping into a new role, that of a mentor, an advocate, and a symbol of resilience. In the next chapter, we'll explore the ripple effects of these reforms as Adrienne embraces her renewed purpose. From mentoring young professionals to inspiring her colleagues, Adrienne's journey is a testament to the power of perseverance and the impact of meaningful change. Stay tuned as we delve into the transformation of Horizon Health and the lessons it offers for all of us. Change, as they say, is a journey rather than a destination. For Adrienne Taylor, the reforms at Horizon Health Hospital marked the beginning of a new chapter 1, where the seeds of equity and inclusion began to take root. Yet, meaningful transformation is seldom swift, and the path forward was fraught with challenges. Still, Adrienne was ready to step into her renewed purpose with courage and determination. The implementation of the initial reforms, mandatory diversity training, and the establishment of a staff support network was met with mixed reactions. Some staff members embraced the changes, recognizing their necessity and potential to create a healthier workplace. Others, however, resisted, dismissing the initiatives as unnecessary or burdensome. Adrienne, now more confident in her voice, took an active role in the training sessions. She shared her experiences with authenticity and grace, using her story to illuminate the often overlooked impact of subtle racism. For many participants, her testimony was a revelation. They began to see how unconscious biases and small acts of exclusion could accumulate into significant harm. One of the most powerful moments during the training sessions occurred when a nurse named Paul, who had previously dismissed Adrienne's contributions, approached her afterward. "I had no idea," he admitted, his tone heavy with remorse. "I've been part of the problem, haven't I?" Adrienne met his gaze, her expression one of understanding rather than reproach. "What matters now," she said gently, "is that you're willing to be part of the solution." The support network, too, became a cornerstone of the hospital's transformation. It provided a safe space for staff to voice concerns, seek advice, and share their experiences without fear of retaliation. Adrienne took on an informal leadership role within the network, mentoring younger nurses and offering guidance to those navigating their own challenges. For Adrienne, this new role was deeply fulfilling. She had spent so much of her career fighting to be seen, to have her contributions acknowledged. Now she was using her experiences to empower others, helping them find their voices and stand up to adversity. One of her mentees, a young nurse named Sarah, shared a story that resonated deeply with Adrienne. Sarah had recently been passed over for a promotion, despite her exceptional performance. She suspected that bias had played a role but felt powerless to address it. Adrienne listened intently, offering both practical advice and emotional support. "You have to advocate for yourself," she told Sarah, "but you don't have to do it alone. That's why this network exists, to give you the strength and the resources to push for what you deserve." As the months passed, the impact of the reforms became increasingly evident. Staff began to engage more openly in discussions about equity and inclusion, challenging outdated attitudes and behaviors. The hospital's leadership, initially hesitant, started to take a more active role in supporting these initiatives. Dr. Greaves, once a symbol of resistance, surprised many by becoming an ally. In a meeting with the staff support network, he publicly acknowledged the shortcomings of the hospital's culture and committed to ongoing efforts to create a more inclusive environment. "We have a long way to go," he admitted, "but I'm committed to seeing this through." For Adrienne, these moments of progress were both validating and inspiring. But the journey wasn't without setbacks. Some colleagues continued to resist the changes, clinging to old habits and mindsets. Adrienne encountered moments of frustration and doubt, questioning whether the hospital's culture could truly be transformed. In those moments, she drew strength from her patients. One in particular stood out: a young girl named Emily, who was recovering from a life-threatening illness. Adrienne had spent countless hours at Emily's bedside, offering not just medical care but comfort and reassurance. On the day of her discharge, Emily's mother pulled Adrienne aside. "You've been more than a nurse to us," she said, her eyes brimming with gratitude. "You've been our rock. Thank you for everything." Those words reminded Adrienne why she had chosen this path: to make a difference in the lives of others. Even in the face of adversity, her renewed sense of purpose extended beyond the hospital walls. Adrienne began speaking at industry conferences, sharing her story and advocating for systemic change in healthcare. Her message was simple but powerful. Compassion and equity are not optional. They are essential to providing truly exceptional care. Adrienne's courage also inspired a ripple effect among her colleagues. Lisa, the junior nurse who had once sought Adrienne's guidance, stepped up to lead a new initiative focused on mentorship and career development for underrepresented staff. Paul, the nurse who had apologized to Adrienne during the training sessions, became an outspoken advocate for diversity and inclusion, using his platform to challenge biases and promote understanding. The transformation of Horizon Health Hospital was not just about policies and procedures, it was about people. Adrienne's story became a catalyst for a cultural shift, proving that change is possible when individuals are willing to confront their own biases and work together for a common goal. By the end of the year, the hospital had become a case study in organizational reform. Its patient satisfaction scores had improved, and employee turnover had decreased significantly. More importantly, Horizon Health was beginning to live up to its promise of being a place where every staff member and patient felt valued and respected. For Adrienne, the journey was far from over. She knew that true change required ongoing effort and vigilance. But as she looked around at the community she had helped build, she felt a profound sense of hope. In the next chapter, we'll see how Adrienne steps into a leadership role, using her experiences to inspire others and advocate for systemic change on a larger scale. Her journey will highlight the power of resilience, mentorship, and the ripple effect of one person's courage. Stay tuned for the next chapter of Adrienne's remarkable story. The journey from silence to strength is never straightforward, but for Adrienne Taylor, it became the defining arc of her career. After enduring months of covert racism and systemic bias, her transformation into a voice for change not only reshaped Horizon Health Hospital, but also inspired countless others to find their own courage. Adrienne's resilience and leadership turned her into a beacon of hope, reminding everyone that one person's determination can spark a ripple effect of transformation. In the months following the implementation of the hospital's reforms, Adrienne began to embrace her newfound role as a mentor and advocate. Her experiences had taught her that change often starts with a single voice, but it gains momentum through collective action. She made it her mission to support those who, like her, had struggled to find their place in a world that too often silenced them. One of Adrienne's first major initiatives was the creation of a mentorship program for new nurses. Drawing from her own experiences, she designed the program to provide not only professional guidance, but also emotional support. "We all need someone who believes in us," she explained during the program's launch. "Someone who sees our potential and helps us navigate the challenges we face." The mentorship program quickly gained traction, attracting participants from diverse backgrounds. Adrienne's mentees included individuals from underrepresented groups who often faced the same barriers she had encountered. Among them was Malik, a young nurse with a passion for pediatrics but a tendency to doubt his abilities. During one of their sessions, Malik confided in Adrienne. "I feel like I'm always being second-guessed," he admitted. "Like no matter what I do, it's never enough." Adrienne listened intently, her own memories of similar struggles flooding back. "I know how that feels," she said softly, "but you have to remember, your worth isn't defined by their doubts. It's defined by the care you provide, the lives you touch. Focus on that, and the rest will follow." Under Adrienne's guidance, Malik began to flourish. He gained confidence in his abilities, took on more challenging assignments, and eventually became a leader within his department. His journey mirrored Adrienne's own, a testament to the power of mentorship and the importance of believing in oneself. But Adrienne's influence didn't stop with her mentees. Her story began to resonate far beyond the walls of Horizon Health. Invitations poured in for her to speak at conferences, workshops, and community events. At each appearance, Adrienne shared her journey with authenticity and vulnerability, weaving in lessons about empathy, resilience, and the importance of standing up against injustice. One of her most memorable speeches took place at a national healthcare symposium. Standing before a packed auditorium, Adrienne began with a simple but powerful statement. "I used to believe that my voice didn't matter. Today, I stand here to tell you that every voice matters." She recounted her experiences at Horizon Health, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a story of transformation. She spoke about the courage it took to confront systemic bias, the allies who had supported her, and the reforms that had reshaped her workplace. But she also challenged the audience to reflect on their own roles in perpetuating or dismantling such systems. "Change doesn't happen in isolation," she said, her voice steady and clear. "It happens when we come together, when we listen to one another, and when we choose to act not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us." Her words sparked a standing ovation, but more importantly, they inspired action. Attendees left the symposium with a renewed sense of purpose, many vowing to implement similar reforms within their own organizations. Back at Horizon Health, Adrienne continued to lead by example. She worked closely with the hospital's leadership team to ensure that the reforms were not just implemented, but sustained. She also collaborated with her colleagues to develop new initiatives, such as workshops on cultural competence and programs to celebrate the diversity of the hospital's staff. Through it all, Adrienne remained grounded. She never sought recognition for herself, focusing instead on the impact her work had on others. But her efforts did not go unnoticed. At the hospital's annual awards ceremony, Adrienne was honored with the inaugural Beacon of Hope Award, a recognition created to celebrate individuals who exemplified the values of equity, compassion, and leadership. As she accepted the award, Adrienne reflected on her journey. "This isn't just my award," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "It belongs to everyone who believed in change, who stood by me, and who worked to make Horizon Health a place where everyone feels valued. This is just the beginning, and together we will keep moving forward." Adrienne's story also inspired others to share their own experiences. Nurses, doctors, and staff members who had once remained silent began to speak up, emboldened by her example. Together, they created a culture of openness and accountability, fostering an environment where diversity was not only acknowledged but celebrated. For Adrienne, the most rewarding part of her journey was seeing the ripple effect of her actions. Her courage had not only transformed her own life, but it also paved the way for others to find their voices. She often reminded her mentees, "Your voice is your power. Use it wisely and use it well." Adrienne's impact extended far beyond Horizon Health. Her story became a symbol of hope and resilience, inspiring healthcare professionals across the country to confront bias and champion inclusion. She proved that change is possible, even in the face of adversity, and that one person's courage can ignite a movement. In the final chapter, we'll reflect on the lessons from Adrienne's journey and explore how her story challenges us to examine our own roles in creating a more equitable world. Stay tuned for a powerful conclusion that ties together the themes of resilience, empathy, and the transformative power of standing up for what is right. Adrienne Taylor's journey is more than just a tale of personal triumph. It's a call to action for all of us. Her story challenges us to confront the often unseen barriers of bias and prejudice that persist in our workplaces, communities, and beyond. But most importantly, it reminds us of the extraordinary power of resilience, empathy, and courage in the face of adversity. As we reflect on Adrienne's transformation from a silenced nurse to a powerful advocate for change, we see the many lessons her story offers. At its core, Adrienne's journey is about the choice to persevere. In the face of systemic challenges, she chose not to let bitterness or defeat define her. Instead, she focused on her values: compassion for her patients, dedication to her craft, and a commitment to doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Her experiences reveal the deep impact that one person's courage can have on an entire system. By sharing her voice, Adrienne not only changed her own life, but also sparked a transformation that rippled through her workplace and beyond. Her actions remind us that change often begins with a single step, one conversation, one act of bravery, one moment of standing up for what we believe in. But Adrienne's story also poses a powerful question to all of us. In the face of injustice, will you be the ally who makes a difference, or will you remain the silent bystander? Adrienne's story wouldn't have reached its transformative conclusion without the intervention of Ulysses Conchetto, a patient who chose to use his platform and privilege to amplify her voice. Ulysses' role as an ally underscores the importance of empathy and action in addressing systemic issues. His decision to listen, observe, and act reminds us that allyship is not passive. It requires us to step out of our comfort zones and advocate for those who may not have the power to advocate for themselves. For many of us, this means taking a closer look at our own workplaces and communities. Are their voices being silenced or overlooked? Are there biases, whether unconscious or deliberate, that we need to confront? And most importantly, What can we do to create an environment where everyone feels valued and respected? Adrienne's story also highlights the critical role of leadership in driving meaningful change. At Horizon Health, the transformation began when the leadership team acknowledged their shortcomings and committed to doing better. This serves as a reminder that leaders set the tone for organizational culture. By prioritizing equity, transparency, and accountability, they can create spaces where diversity thrives and everyone has an opportunity to succeed. As we close the chapter on Adrienne's journey, it's important to remember that her story is not unique. Countless individuals face similar challenges every day, navigating environments where their contributions are undervalued and their voices are stifled. Adrienne's story is a testament to their strength and a reminder that their struggles matter. For those who find themselves in Adrienne's shoes, her journey offers hope. It shows that even in the darkest moments, there is a path forward, a path forged through resilience, support, and the unwavering belief that every voice deserves to be heard. And for those who may not have experienced such challenges firsthand, Adrienne's story is an invitation to be part of the solution. It's a call to listen, to learn, and to act in ways that make the world more equitable for everyone. Let us carry the lessons of Adrienne's journey with us as we move forward. Let us strive to be allies like Ulysses, advocates like Adrienne, and leaders who embrace accountability and change. Most importantly, let us remember that even the smallest actions can create ripples of impact, touching lives in ways we may never fully realize. Adrienne's journey is not over, and neither is ours. The work of building a more just and inclusive world is ongoing, but her story reminds us that it is worth every effort. If Adrienne's story has inspired you, take a moment to reflect on how you can make a difference in your own community or workplace. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what steps you're taking to promote equity and inclusion. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and empower. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who might need a reminder that their voice matters. Together, we can create a world where every voice is heard, every contribution is valued, and every person has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you in the next video.